All right, everyone. So earlier this week, we did a video showing you guys the research into this week's slate for DFS, right? Some of the plays we liked, some of the plays we didn't like, and now we have completed our lineup. So what I'm in is a tournament. There's $20, 20 entries max. There were $3 a piece. We did 20 different lineups. So that's what we have here. As we always say, look, I'm not an expert. Okay. So if you're thinking, well, oh wow, I take these and it means I cash. Nope, not going to be the case, right? We very well could cash, we may not. I'm just someone who likes DFS, and I'm going to give you my explanation for the people I did put in, why I put them in. But once again, there's nothing saying that, I could end up losing each and every one of these. So just know that going in. And also, I think if I was to say what's the reason maybe to watch the video, right? It's you have your own research that you do. You have the own things you like. Maybe from this video, there's one player you didn't think about, one value play we can give you, or one thing that's like, I'm going to add that to my lineup. And that's probably what I would say would be the best thing. So let's get right into it. We're going to show the exposure just so you guys know why we went with each one. So the most exposure we have here is with Justin Jefferson. Okay, so out of the 20 lineups, he is in 50%, so he's in 10 of them. There's a few reasons for this. Number one, I think his price has a lot to do with it. He just fit in to a lot of the lineups. And I think you're going to see, I did this by hand. This was not a situation of, I have some product that says make sure I have X amount of exposure, right? This wasn't a mathematical equation for me. That's just not how I do them. So the reason for this is that his price, in my opinion, just was very good and fit into my lineups well, and I did like him. So it wasn't a case of only that, but with Justin Jefferson, it's very simple. He's a guy that has, like for instance, Jamar Chase is 8,200. That's where Justin Jefferson usually is. When this offense is rolling, that's the kind of price you can expect. He's all the way down to 6,900 due to the Vikings' poor offense that it's been, right? And it's the QB play. And so the way I'm thinking is we're getting value in terms of the overall price of Justin Jefferson, right? We have great value with that at 6,900. We also have a great matchup, right? I understand the Commanders looked good last week, but all we need is Jefferson to get receptions. If he can get 8 receptions and find a way in the end zone, he's worth it. This isn't what we usually see with Jefferson, where it's like, okay, if we play him, he has to go off crazy because we're playing him at 8,200. We're playing him at 8,000. We're playing him at 6,900. That lowers the actual bar we need from him with the upside of a Jamar Chase like player. If he busts a huge touchdown, even if the quarterback play, whoever it ends up being, even if the quarterback plays bad, if he's able to bust one touchdown, a 40, 50-yard touchdown, he was worth playing, right? And so because of that, his price fit well and he fit perfectly into a lot of these lineups. That's why he is 50% owned. I don't know what his ownership will look like overall. There might be a lot of people who feel that way, but for now, he is, well, and he's going to stay. He has 50%, so he's our highest percentage owned. The next guy is a little bit different. Okay, this was Chase Brown. Now, I don't hate the matchup that Chase Brown has, right? This Bills game is the highest, as we said in our preview or our research. This is the highest game on the slate in terms of price or total points. He is at 6,700, and he can do a lot for you, right? He can run the ball. He catches the ball out of the backfield at times. He's a key part of the offense, but he is 6,700. Think about it. He's only 200 salary less than Justin Jefferson. And so it's not to say that I don't like to play. The reason he's in 40% of the lineups is because his salary, simply put, fit in. And I do think it's a good matchup against Buffalo, right? I think he's going to have a great game. I'm just pointing out that with Jefferson, I really feel like, oh my God, he's someone that could really go off today if the quarterback play could just be good enough to get him the ball. Brown was more of a salary based thing, but he does have a great matchup in a great game. So nothing to take away, and he is talented. So with all of that, Chase Brown, he is in 40% of them just because he fit in so well. The next one is Shakir. Now, Shakir is interesting because when I look at Shakir, he was someone I trusted last week in my DFS lineups, and he was so close to getting a touchdown. The announcer said he just kind of ran a little bit too fast, and that's why Josh Allen threw it slightly behind him in the red zone. But this week, I think he's actually going to be able, or I shouldn't say that. I think he's a boomer bust type guy. And so in this matchup, I think it's perfect. Let me read you his last 5 games. Last game, he was targeted 4 times, only had 1 catch. Not a great game. Game before that, he had 8 catches, targeted 10 times for 110 yards. Pretty good, right? The game before that, he only had one catch for 3 yards. And the 3 games prior to that, he had 7 catches, and 6 catches. And he also had touchdowns in one of those games. I just feel like Shakir is one of those boomer bust guys, and this is a perfect situation for him to bust one of those big touchdown runs, right? Even the thing with him, or I should say, when I mean run, I mean he catches it short and takes it, all the way to the end zone. He can have those type of plays. So I think in a high scoring game, Shakir is one of those guys you want to have. I do have him in a lot of lineups, 35%, but luckily we are getting him at 5,300. So we don't need him. This isn't like you're spending up for a major guy. We don't necessarily need him to have the biggest game of all time. Next one, Olave. As we said, if you watched our bets, I think this game is going to be higher scoring than some think. And the bottom line is, if this game goes high scoring, Olave is going to have to be the one of the ones doing it, right? And he's not super expensive. I believe I'm trying to find a lineup that has him. Yeah, so he's 6,500. So it's not the end of the world. And also, I wanted to fade a little bit away from Jefferson, even though they are in some lineups together. But there is an argument to be made. Anything that you have him in, that you have like 400 salary left over, I would say Jefferson's probably a better play. But Olave, if this is the type of game I think it's going to be, he's going to be a key part of it. You are betting on a bad quarterback, which I shouldn't say bad quarterback. You are betting on a quarterback that right now on a team and offense that's inconsistent. But if it goes off, I think Olave is going to be a big portion. I will say out of the top four, he is the one I'm worried about probably the most, having so much ownership in him. But once again, at 6,500, it's not that, the bar doesn't matter, but it's not like we're spending 8,000. And he has, he gets a lot of targets. I mean, last game he was 4 or 47. Not a great stat line. He did have a touchdown, however. So, you know, he's getting targeted 7 times. Game before that, targeted 13 times. We're seeing the targets there. So you at least know that he's going to have his chances as long as he can make some catches. Next one, RJ Harvey. So this is one obviously based off matchup. Denver's offense has certainly struggled. His price was one of the main selling points for me. Good price, good matchup. And if we look at his stats, 13 attempts, 35 yards last week, but he had 2 touchdowns. So I understand he might not be, setting the world on fire at times, but in a game like this is a game that feels like Denver could lean on him a little bit. And if we just get that big broken run, I like it a lot. But once again, 30%, pretty big ownership for a guy like that, but I think this is a good spot for him. Next one, 30% ownership also is Jaylen Warren. Now, he's about 6,000, I believe. That's his salary. And I like this because I think the Steelers offense, right, obviously it needs to find its way, right? It's really had some problems. Here's the issue, right, or here's the reason I should say I'm going with him, is that I think the Steelers are going to try to settle down this offense a little bit, right? They're going to try to get that run game going. They're going to try to use him a lot, and the hope is he can get in the end zone. The only scary part of this is that Kenneth Gainwell continues to be getting looks out of the backfield, whether that's touchdown, in the red zone looks or stuff like that. So that's the one scary thing, is that if Gainwell takes a lot of Warren's touchdowns, if Gainwell takes a lot from Warren, then this might really burn us. But the matchup, I think, is perfect because they're going to want to settle this thing down, right? I understand the Ravens, everybody's on their train now and off the Steelers train. Warren has the ability. He's had big games this year. There's no question about it. And actually, I just want to look at some of Warren's past games here. If I look at Warren's past games, 10 of 35 and a touchdown last week, 18 of 68 and a touchdown the week prior. He's someone that you can have a level of trust with, right? So I understand the risk, especially with Gainwell, but we're going to go Warren. I like the matchup. I like the spot. And I think Tomlin is going to be thinking we need to get the running game going to open up a lot of the passing stuff that we want. Okay, the next one, it's funny because we actually, I don't remember exactly what we said about this defense in the research, but I completely changed my mind because they were not what I had written down. I've decided the Packers defense is going to be my most played defense this week at 30%. Part of the reason was the price. It's only 3,100. But the reason I thought that they're a good one is because when I look at the other defenses that's on the slate, there are a bunch of games where you're like, maybe that defense can go off, but also I just don't know if I trust it, right? That defense might have a breakdown here. Like you would think that if we look at the defenses as we go through, the Seahawks against Atlanta, they're 4,000, but that seems like a lock, or the Broncos against the Raiders. And I understand those look good, but it just feels like those are going to be played so much, or the Rams against Arizona, or Cleveland against Tennessee, those higher priced defenses. Those four defenses are probably going to be played so much because of, how good they've been. But here's the scary thing with the Seahawks, right? What happens if Atlanta shows out a little bit? What happens if this is the one kind of weak game we get from the Seahawks defense? The Broncos, look, I understand how good that Broncos defense is played. We've seen what the Giants were able to do to them even when those two teams played. And what happens if this is that one game where the Raiders are really stepping up, right? And find a way. Arizona, they're a team I just can't get a read on overall. And so and with Cleveland, I understand how good their defense is, but as we saw against the 49ers, what ends up happening is sometimes the offense is so bad or the special teams makes a mistake and it leads to Cleveland giving up points. And so I just don't know with those four teams, especially knowing that out of the four defenses we just named, three of those offenses, Seattle's, Denver's, and Cleveland, have looked not so great. I understand Seattle has a good offense throughout the year, but as of late hasn't looked perfect. I just don't love that. That's why I really like the Packers here, because what the Packers give us is number one, okay, the offense might not always be clicking on all cylinders, but it's not as anemic as the Broncos. It's not as anemic as the Browns. And also, we know Chicago, the type of game they want to play is beneficial to us for fantasy because the Bears aren't trying to score 38 points a game, right? They're going to be doing a little ball control here. They're going to try to run the ball. So if the Packers blow out the Bears, this defense plays well. If the Packers lose a close game to the Bears, guess what? This defense also will still play well because of the style of play that the Bears like to do. So that's why even though in my research I didn't go with them, the more I thought about it, I was like, this is the defense I'm going to roll with. And they are in 30% of them because of that. So that's why we went Packers D the most. I think if obviously, if one of those other top defenses was 3,100, I would probably roll with them over the Packers, but maybe not, to be completely honest with you. Okay, go down now to Ibuka. Now, Ibuka's tough because he's in 25%. He really burned us last week, but I do think this is going to be a high scoring game. So I think for his price at only 6,300, he fit in well with the rest of this lineup. I figured let me go with Ibuka, right? There's not much else to say besides that. Bottom line is that connection with Baker is either going to be there or not be there. He's in 25%. Okay, Judkins is also in 25% of my leagues, and this one is so tough for me. This was the Titans Browns game is the toughest game on the slate because if you told me every sort of outcome of a game that could be possible with this game, I would say that sounds about right. Could Tennessee have some weirdly good game? Yes. Could the Browns have some weirdly good game? Yes. Could both defenses dominate the opposing offense? Yes. And that really scares me. That's why I went with Judkins, because I think Judkins give us the most outcomes, right? I think if this game is close, they're going to be running Judkins. I think if this game is a blowout, they're going to be running Judkins. And I think even if Shadur Sanders has a pretty good game, as long as his offense has any sort of a heartbeat, and if we could just get to the red zone, I think Judkins can feast on this defense. But the Titans are a team that scares me just because they get frisky at weird times, right? They become a decent team that's like, the defense is stopping the run and making plays at weird times. So I just figured you need to have someone in this game in some way. And Judkins is, I think, for his price, is a perfect addition. Here's Addison. Now, this is one of the things that worries me about what we've done. Okay, so obviously Jefferson, we have 50% ownership. Addison, we have 25% ownership, and I don't believe I played them together in any of the lineups. Maybe there's one lineup where they're together, but I don't think I played them in any of the lineups together. So that means 75% of these lineups have a Vikings receiver, which, don't get me wrong, makes me very nervous. But the reason he's so highly owned is because he is 4,900. If we go and look, he is 4,900, and that allows you to open up. This was a weird slate where there were value plays that I liked a lot, but then there was also some really expensive guys, but I didn't love all the really expensive guys. And so when I look at that, I go, oh my God, I need to find cash savings. And I think Addison at 4,900, when you consider matchup, when you consider history, he's the type of guy that I think can do the most. I mean, last game, he was targeted 10 times and he had 5 receptions. So he's getting his targets, right? This is a guy that in a lot of cases gets his targets. And so I understand we do have Jefferson in a lot of lineups as well, but I don't think it's mutually exclusive when you consider their opponent and when you consider his price. I think he's a guy that could, if this offense has any pulse, right? That's all we need. If they get a pulse, both of these guys can have pretty good games. And at 4,900, the bar is very low from what we need out of him just for him to be worth playing. Okay, at tight end, this was tough for me. I might regret this because if this game doesn't go the way we want, then it's going to be a problem. But Cade Otton is in 25% of the leagues. 25%. He just to me is going to be Baker is going to be looking to him, and this is a game I think if they get in that red zone play action pass, Cade Otton touchdown. All we need is one, and he is very cheap. He's only let me find a lineup here with him. I wish they showed on here the actual. He's only 3,600. There's a lot of tight ends that were value here, so I just think he's the type of guy that gets enough looks, and we'll go look at his stats. He 2 targets last week, not a ton, but he had 7 the week prior, 5 the week prior to that, and 12 the week prior to that. So he has high upside, and I think he's pretty. In this matchup, I think his floor is also high enough. So that's why we went him. Jamar Chase, only 25% of the leagues. Would have liked to get him in more because I think he could have a big game. But I don't think that there's any reason for me to be doubting Jamar Chase in this spot. He's going to be catching the ball. Joe Burrow's going to be looking for him, and he can have a massive game. We needed to have him in some lineup. And the only reason he's not a higher ownership in my leagues is because of his price, right? I mean, you look at the top owned guys for us, what do you see? It's kind of all the cheaper guys, right? Anywhere between, really, it's between 5K and 7K that we have high ownership for in leagues. That's why Jamar Chase is down here at 25%, right? He's someone who, for his price, this is pretty high ownership. We're putting our kind of backing behind him. He is probably he is actually, now that I'm looking at it, he is the most expensive high ownership guy we have because he just feels like if this game is as high scoring as they think, Jamar Chase is going to have to do something, right? It's just, even if they're double teaming him, he could find a way. So, like that with Jamar Chase, out of all the high price guys, he was the one that I had the most of. And if we look at the rest of these high price receivers just for a second, part of the reason for that is Puka Nacua. I understand that the Cardinals aren't a great team, but I just they get frisky at random times and they're just really annoying. And Chase is cheaper than him. Smith and Jigba 9K. I just don't love the matchup against Atlanta considering how Seattle's offense has been playing. It doesn't mean he won't have great games, but when I look at it and I go, that's 9K, I think Jamar Chase, his matchup, everything fits better. And he just fit into the lineup perfectly. So that's why we're going there. Mark Andrews, don't need to talk a lot about this one. To me, it makes complete sense to have him in some lineups and he's in 25% of them because he's so trustworthy, right? He's Lamar Jackson's security blanket, and he's only 4,100. I like the matchup. He's going to get his targets. Like last game, 6 targets. He had 4 catches, 3 targets the game prior, and then back-to-back 5-target games previous to that. At the tight end position, I think it's worth having. So basically, we have 2 guys that we really like, 25% on Otton, 25% on Andrews, and that makes up about 50% are trustworthy tight ends, right? That's kind of what I wanted to do at the tight end position. And it's easy because they're both very cheap. They're both super cheap. So, I shouldn't say, maybe not for tight ends, but as it pertains to the rest of the salary, right? Okay. So let's move now down to 20%. Now, Malik Washington, he's a guy I get caught playing a lot in, he's had his good games and his bad games, but it just seems like McDaniel is always trying to get him, McDaniel is always trying to get him to, always giving him a chance to score on some big plays. And so that's the reason why he's cheaper too. Let's just be honest about that. So because of that, I think that's one of the reasons we decided to play him. Actually, I want to see one thing as we're doing this video. I just want to see if I go on here and I click on a name, is it going to ruin what we have? Like, can I click on, it's like if I go to Malik Washington, oh, perfect. Okay, so we could do this to help out a little bit. So he's only 4,100. I didn't realize we could do that. That's my fault. I've been doing it on my phone. I could do it on here. And you look at his game log. I mean, look at the type of looks. 5 targets, 3 targets. I understand these aren't crazy numbers and only 7 fantasy points, but he just has to get in that end zone, right? And if he gets in the end zone like he did here, he'll have his chances. So in a game against the Jets, I think he's worth taking a flyer on. Next one is A Chain. I would have loved to have gotten A Chain in more lineups. A Chain is just Mr. Simply put, he is Mr. Reliable this year, right? There's just no other way to look at it besides that. He is Mr. Reliable this year. Look at what he did last week. I mean, look at some of these games, the last few games. He's playing the Jets. Would have loved to have gotten him into more, but it's the price. I mean, look at the price jump, right? If we go back to week one, this is a 6,900 guy, right? That's how much he costs. He's all the way up to 8,300 and now 8,800 this week. So I just couldn't fit him in enough leagues. But remember, Chase 25%. Now we have another 20% of A chain ownership. Next one is Jerry Judy. Now this is kind of a tough play because when you look at Jerry Judy, you don't know what you're going to get. And one of the heartbreaking things last week, because I did have him in some lineups, was watching as Shadur Sanders just slightly overthrew him on what would have been a massive touchdown. And so one of the reasons against this Titans team I have Judy in there is take a look at this price, only 4,200. Look at what he was week one, 5,400. He is now up to 4,200. He can have a big game. You're still seeing a decent amount of targets. When I see 4 targets and then he had 7 and 12 targets, that makes me think Judy's going to be getting the looks. It's all about can he finish. And at 4,200, he's just a good enough value play to put in 20% of the leagues. Michael Pittman is a weird one. I don't love the matchup, okay, just to be clear, but I feel like I have a decent feel sometimes for when Michael Pittman goes off. I had him in my actual fantasy team in a bunch of leagues. And so I kind of am able to just kind of feel this is going to be Pittman's game where he goes off. And you notice, look at some of the games 3, 2, and then you get a 23 and a 23 and a 20. Like, look at this run he was on, right? So he's had his games where he really goes off. And I think Pittman, he falls into a slumber for a few weeks and then it's like a rocket ship, right? And I think this could be a potential 23 game. So at his price at only 5,400, he fits in 20% of the leagues perfectly. Another tight end. So actually, let's do the math here. So we have 25% and 25%, right? Where's Kate Otten? So 70%, we now have TJ Hawkinson in another league. So I would say 70% of our tight ends are all in, I would say, pretty high upside and pretty, high floors even. I love Hawkinson in this because look at these targets he gets 6, 4, 6. He's going to get some targets, right? And if he just finds the end zone, he hasn't found the end zone in 4 weeks. This was a game, he only had 2 catches for 11 yards, but because he got that touchdown, he was at 9 points. Imagine if we can get a 6 reception, 6 target game with a touchdown pass. That's what we're looking for. So I think part of the reason when I was putting together these lineups, I wanted to give ourselves, okay, what are the best matchups we have at the tight end position that we could have a tight end that gives us at a cheap price that 15, $20 game or 15, 20 point game. So that's Hawkinson. Not much else to say about that. Look, if the Vikings offense does bad, I think we might be in a little bit of trouble because of how much we put into them. But luckily, when you talk about Addison, he's cheap, right? So we could have one of those guys go bad and it not be the end of the world. Okay, let's take a look now at Josh Jacobs. So I really like Jacobs, and I said that in our preview. I'm pretty sure, some of these things I did change my mind a little bit on, but at least I give the explanation. But for Jacobs, 6,800, back around where he was. This is a risk. I don't know how healthy he actually is, but he's still worth putting in because you know, if the Packers get up early, they're going to try to run the ball on this Bears team. And so this is I just had to get somebody in that game there, had to find a way to put somebody in. 20% of the lineups, he's not overly expensive. I thought he's pretty good. We are now getting into our top owned QB. You notice in this, we actually have a long way here. Only 20% ownership for our top QB. And it's because I don't have a ton of trust in any of these QBs today, even Josh Allen, as much as I really like him and think he can have a good game. And it's because of this, right? If we look at what he could do, look at these last games 17, 10. What did he do before that? 47. So you just don't know what Josh Allen you're going to get. And I don't want to put Josh Allen into lineups mainly because of this. Meaning, if he was Joe Burrow's price, or if he was, even Lamar's price, which is $1,000 cheaper, he would be in even more of these lineups. But at 7,700, you're already starting to really cut in to that salary. And so I just couldn't find myself putting him into too many because that meant I couldn't have put in Jamar Chase in as many of lineups or A Chain in as many of lineups. And so that's one of the reasons why I love the matchup. Everything on paper says he's going to be great, but bottom line is only 20%. That's the only way I could fit him in. Okay, next one is Zay Flowers. Now, he's a risk, but the bottom line is look at these targets. He gets great targets, and he's been consistently putting up like the same amount. Like, take a look. He just hasn't found the end zone. This is a game. This is certainly a game in which he could score a touchdown. So I looked at it at only 6,100 salary. You're gonna have to find, if Lamar can find him, especially in our Lamar lineups that we have, works out perfectly. I think at 6,100, he gives us a good, decent floor. As you can see, I mean, last week was terrible with only 1.6, but take a look, right? I really like that. If this is the floor we're getting, and if we can add a touchdown to that, he will be well worth at his price, taking that risk on because he can have a deep touchdown, and if Lamar finds his way in this one. Next one, James Cook. Obviously needed James Cook in there. James Cook is the same price as Josh Allen. Actually, he's $100 more expensive, which shows you the type of year he's had. I look at his past games, look at the point total, and there just seems to be a pretty, considering the opponent, it just seems that there's a pretty decent floor for him. Obviously he had bad games against New England and a bad game against Atlanta. I like both of those defenses. I think he's more apt to be putting up the 20s as his low and maybe into the 30s if we get lucky. But obviously, I like Josh Allen a little bit more in this spot. I think Josh Allen is going to do a little bit more, but you had to have Cook in some way. And so we have him in 15% of the lineups. Next one, Kenneth Walker III. This is a guy that is a really, really good running back. He with the whole Charbonnet situation, you never know what you're going to get, but I had to go just in case Seattle dominates this game. I don't know if they are. I know that's kind of the thinking is they will, but I just had to roll with Kenneth Walker in a few lineups. I did go with him in a few lineups, and we just have to hope he gets in the end zone at the end of the day. So he's in another 15%, especially at his price. Next one, another 15% ownership is Breece Hall. Look, I like the Dolphins this week. I think they're going to play pretty well, but the Dolphins are not a juggernaut by any means. And so when I look at Breece Hall, he's going to have his looks. And could we see a situation like we saw against Cincinnati where he just has a day? We want to be able to be there if he does have that day. And I do think he's going to be seeing the rock 19 times plus 2 receptions, 16 times plus 4 receptions. There's a lot to love about the matchup, the player, the whole nine. We will be rolling with Breece Hall. Next one, DK Metcalf. I think a lot of people are sleeping on could DK Metcalf have a big game? I understand he hasn't looked great this year, and he certainly hasn't looked great this year, but the Ravens defense has been highly inconsistent. They've been better as of late, but they've been highly inconsistent. All it needs is one of those big DK Metcalf passes, and we're in business, right? One of those deep touchdown passes that he's gotten in the past. 5,400, don't hate it, right? Don't hate it. We put him in another 15%. These 15% guys, it's all about making sure we have a little bit, we dip our toe in a little bit to some of these areas. Next one is Derrick Henry. This is more, I mean, look, the Steelers defense has been good. It's been bad at times, mostly bad, I would say. But with Derrick Henry, you just need to, in a game like this, have a little bit of him because even if this game is ugly, all we need is for him to get look at these games 17, 22, 23. It's just kind of sneaky. He hasn't had a great year, but as of late, he's had sneaky good fantasy games. And I think if there's one guy we could trust in this one, especially with the way Lamar's been playing, it's Derrick Henry. Only 15% of lineups, though. So that's why we go with him. Now, you might be a little interested in this. We went Vikings defense, and I think this is going to be a very low owned defense, but this is a great defense. This is a really, really good defense, and they have the ability to score like we saw there. They're only 3,000. Just, even last week, because of how many defensive touchdowns Seattle scored, this was a team that was still able to get 9 fantasy points. So against the Commanders, I'll take a risk on them. They might be low owned. I like it. You can see we're getting into the defenses, only 15% owned. The Browns, you had to touch a little bit here because they could dominate. They really could dominate Tennessee, but I only wanted them in 15% because, like I said, look at last week. I understand San Francisco's way better than Tennessee, but if you watch that game, I don't blame the defense for a lot of what happened. I mean, what really broke this game open was I think it was a big punt return or kick return. I can't remember which one it was, and that allowed like I just don't. Sometimes the how bad Cleveland's overall team is hurts this defense. Okay, and so that's why I went with this. But we've also seen 16, 17, 25. They could score. I wanted to have a little bit of them in case they did. The Falcons are another team. I know this seems crazy, right? I understand completely this seems crazy, but look at the points that they've put up: 16, 10, 10, 9, 21. I like the Falcons a little bit here, especially at their price. What are they? They're only 2,500. They have a chance to do some things. And I'm just going to bring you back to what I told you about last week. Look at the Vikings lost 26 to nothing. Look what this fantasy points they put up for a defense in a 26-0 loss. Pretty darn good, right? I mean, I understand. It's when you look at what the Seahawks did, putting up 30. I understand. 9 is about okay. That was a decent play at defense. It's not maybe the best pick, but or it is a good pick in some ways. But look at the price that you got from them, 2,300. I think there's a lot of similarities. I just don't know if this offense of the Seahawks is rolling right now, and I think the Falcons defense has been good at times. So that's why we're going with that. All right, our second quarterback of the day, Baker Mayfield. I had to go with him just because we've seen so much of Baker Mayfield, you know, uh, early on in the year. I know he's probably injured, but this price is getting down there. What was his first week price? 6,600. What was his max? 6,600. That's really where he maxed out. He is now down to 5,800. If he's healthy and in there, I like him in this game. All he needs to do is throw a few touchdown passes at that price. Had to give him a little bit, 15%. Dawson Knox. I'm not sure if Kincaid is going to be back because he has been dealing with injury, but he's only 2,800, and there's just a pretty good consistency here. If he's in there, maybe we'll have to make a change on 15% of these lineups if Kincaid is confirmed to be fully healthy and in. I think he's a good risk, though. Now, you might be shocked by this next one. 10% of lineups we threw in Darnell Washington. Now, if you look at the game log, you'll see not great, but is this a chance that he can get us a touchdown here? It seems to me they're using him a lot more than they even did early on in the season, and it just feels like at 2,600, you really need him to do very little. I wanted to take a risk. It's one of those things, not a ton of data necessarily behind it, but if he gets 5 targets in this game at 2,600, I don't hate it. Jalen Waddle, because I do like, Tua right now. Waddle is, I think, 6,800. So I'm playing him in 10%. The reason he's not in more is because this guy is 6,900. Okay. So he's only in 10% because of how much we get out of Justin Jefferson, but 10% of the league, Jalen Waddle. Joe Burrow, 10%, had to have him in some lineups. I just don't, we have Chase Brown in a lot of them. So I didn't want to overdo it, but he's cheaper than Josh Allen. So if you really want to get into this game and put some better players around your quarterback, Joe Burrow is that guy, right? And I figured as long as we have Jamar Chase, we could get a little bit of that Bengals love, right? Either way. Tua, just pairing him with Jalen Waddle, 10% in each. Tyler Lockett's an interesting one we put in. It might make 0 sense, and I understand why that might be the case, right? It might make no sense to have him in any leagues. And to be honest with you, the leagues we do have him in, or the lineups we do have him in, are ones that are, at the end of the day, kind of the more like contrarian one. So he's not someone I would put in a lot of lineups, but he's only 3,500. Look at his last 4 games. I mean, sure, only 1 target last week, but that was just an ugly game overall. 5 targets the week prior, 3 the week prior to that, 6 the last time they played against Denver. I understand Denver has a good defense, but can Tyler Lockett catch one of those patented deep balls that he's seen before? All we need at 3,500 is him to do a little bit. If he can get us this 10 points he got against the Raider or against Cleveland, I would consider him a fine play. And if he can find the end zone, hallelujah, right? That would be perfect. Okay. Devontae Adams, we had to go him in one league at least because He's been a beast. It's just two straight games with 2 touchdowns, and that's where he makes all of his money. And I hated this game completely, but I was like, you need to have at least. So this is 10% is 2 lineups. I had to get him in there, and Puka was way more expensive, so I figured I would rather have this guy in. Sutton, I had to find a way to get Sutton into some of them, um, because they're playing the Raiders. Even if I think the Raiders might keep it close and that offense might struggle a little bit, you don't want to be completely out on a team that's playing the Raiders, right? You want to have something there that you could be happy if they do go off. Next, the 10% ownership as well. The Raiders defense. Look, the Raiders defense, if we go and look at their price is only 2,000, and for good reason, because the Raiders have been terrible, right? If we look at their game log here, 4-5-2, not great fantasy points. Look what they did last time they played Denver. That's 10 points, right? They did a pretty good job last time they played Denver, and Denver's offense has not looked great. And so you talk about cash savings. If I'd love to see, let's find one of the lineups right here. So this one, what did going Raiders allow us to get, okay, by doing this? Well, we were able to get Smith and Jigba, right? This was one of our contrarian lineups where we wanted to roll with Sam Darnold. So you're able to pay up for a guy like this and not have too many really bad players because you put in the Raiders defense. Let's find the other lineup that has it just to show you what it opens up for us. Here's the other one. What did this do here? Well, we were able to have a pretty stacked lineup of pretty good players. I mean, you have no, this is the only real low pick we have. By going to Raiders, we are able to stack this lineup up, right? With these are all pretty big names. Everybody here, even if Jefferson is cheaper. So that's kind of the type of stuff that Raiders defense can get you. The next one was the Broncos defense. I'm not in love with the Broncos defense here. They did put up 14 last time, mostly because you're paying a premium for them comparison, to other defenses, but I couldn't go without having them, right? I just couldn't go without having them. And considering we did have value plays elsewhere, I figured, look, just go Broncos, right? Like if you look at this lineup, we don't have any massive names in it, but the Broncos defense didn't stop us from going with a decent lineup. So I think this one was one where I realized I just have enough money. We'll throw them in there because they probably have a good, year. Let's find the other Broncos defense here. See, this one, we were able to pay up with Jamar Chase anyways, but we had to go Lockett and Shepard and Coleman, right? This was, like I was saying, one of these contrarian lineups that we went Lockett, where this is, these guys are all Coleman to Dawson Knox, these are all going to be low ownership, but has potential because we were able to get these big names and a good defense in there. All right, Lamar made it into 2 lineups as well. I've been on Lamar for the last 2 weeks, and he's been abysmal. He's been absolutely horrible. 9 points, 7 points, and the week prior to that, he only had 6 points. So he has been a complete and utter disaster. There's zero question about it, right? This is a spot where maybe he turns it around. You threw him in some lineups with Zay Flowers, right? Because I do think that they could have a game. You just didn't want to be without him at all. And Mark Andrews, I think he could do some things. So, just having a little bit of him in there is good. Now we're into the lineups where we only have them in one. So Shadur Sanders, I'm interested to find the lineup we put him in to show you guys what we did there. So what do you see? A Chain, Cook, Jefferson, and we paired him with Judy, and we got the Packers defense. So you're just able to have some bigger names because of the cash savings, and he could have a big game against the Titans. Wanted to throw him in there. JJ McCarthy, let's take a look at that lineup. As long as he plays, Hawkinson, Jefferson, Chase, like it just frees up a lot of cap when you're saving that much at QB, and they're both not playing against very good teams. So all things considered, that's why we ran with him. Franklin, just having somebody else in that Denver game just in case. Marvin Harrison, I don't love that game, but he's pretty cheap. And for his skill level, if he's healthy, we like it. Puka, don't love him today, but you find a way to get him in one. Trey Tucker, can Gino find him for one deep one? He's in, I think, the same lineup. Let's find, because Gino's also 5% owned. If we could find him, I believe, is he the one? Oh, they're actually not in the same lineup, but so maybe he was cost savings in a separate lineup. Let's see. Oh, he's in this one. Okay, so he was cash savings in this one. Puka, Trey Tucker, Smith, and Jigba wanted him in the Darnold stack lineup. We were able to, by going the Raiders defense, opened us up to have him in one in case he does go off. Rodgers, really don't like him today because of the injury. But with Metcalf, right, all he needs to do is hit him once, and maybe we're looking at him being worth playing. Stafford, obviously, you need to get one of, even though I hate the matchup, I wanted one lineup with Stafford at QB. That's what that looks like. Who else here? Shepard, Ingram, just in case Ingram goes off. Rams defense in one, Jacoby Myers, and then Cooper Kupp, a very cheap Seattle Seahawks wide receiver, helping us out with cash savings. So that's our lineups. You can see them all here. It's just one of those things where I think we did a good job of balancing out ownership. That's kind of what I wanted to do. I didn't want to have, when I first started making lineups, we were really top heavy on a lot of this stuff. And by my later lineups I made, I was able to even this out pretty well. I think this is what I was looking for in terms of if you go down this list, these are the guys I like the most, especially at their price, with the defense I like the most, but we're not overdoing it, right? Meaning RJ Harvey can have a not so great game and we can still win in those lineups, right? Just because of the ownership that we have. There's nobody, Jefferson at 50%. And like, I would have liked to have Brown a little bit less, certainly. But I just, at his price and in what was next to that and how he fit into the lineups, I just didn't see a need. It ended up at 40%. I don't think it's the end of the world. Shakir is a big if, but once again, considering his price, right? We're looking at 5,300. As long as he can get to, a game like this, doesn't kill us, right? If he doesn't have that 21-point game like he did against Houston. So thank you all for watching, and we will see you next time.